The room grew still. Every whisper silenced. Every smirk froze in place. Pastor Whitmore stepped closer to the Carter family, his eyes sweeping across the congregation. "For weeks," he said slowly, "I've been hearing complaints, petty comments about who belongs here and who doesn't." He paused, letting the words sink into the silence. "Let me remind you all, this house is not yours. It belongs to God. And in God's house, everyone belongs." The laughter that had bubbled moments before evaporated. Some bowed their heads in shame. Others stiffened, their pride unwilling to yield. Rochelle's heart swelled with a mix of relief and disbelief. She hadn't expected this man, this leader, to stand up so boldly. But Marcus remained cautious. He knew words alone didn't change hearts. Whitmore turned to Marcus. "Brother, I must confess, I hesitated when I saw you walk in. Not because you don't belong, but because I feared what this congregation might reveal about itself." Gasps echoed. The pastor was admitting the unspoken truth. "But perhaps," he continued, his voice trembling with conviction, "God sent you here to test us, to hold up a mirror." He extended his hand. "Would you be willing to share your story with us?" Marcus froze. He wasn't a public speaker. He didn't seek attention. But something in Whitmore's eyes urged him on. He looked at Rochelle, then at his children. Rochelle gave a subtle nod. Jordan whispered, "Remind them, Dad." Marcus stepped forward. He stood at the pulpit, gripping the edges for strength. The same pulpit from which words of grace had been spoken for over a century. Now his to use. "My family came here today looking for a place to worship," Marcus began. His voice was steady, but heavy with emotion. "But the moment we walked through those doors, we were judged. Not for our hearts, not for our faith, but for our skin." A ripple moved through the sanctuary. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided his gaze. "My children heard your whispers. They saw your stares. And yet, here they stand, still wanting to praise the same God you claim to serve." His voice cracked as he looked at Naomi. "Do you know what my little girl asked me today? She asked if Jesus loved her too. And that's because of what she felt in this room." The silence was deafening. The weight of his words pressed down on every pew. Rochelle rose, her voice soft but strong. "We've faced rejection before. At schools, in stores, on the street. But here, in a church where love is supposed to be the foundation. That cuts deeper than anything else." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "But we won't let your cruelty teach our children bitterness. We will teach them love. We will teach them faith. Because that's what God calls us to do." Jordan stood then, holding up his Bible. His voice trembled but carried. "Jesus said, 'Let the little children come to me.' He didn't say only the ones who look like you. He meant all of us." The boy's words pierced the room more powerfully than any sermon. The sanctuary erupted, not in applause, but in division. Some people rose to their feet, clapping, tears rolling down their cheeks. "Amen," one shouted. "That's the truth." But others crossed their arms, faces hardened. A man in the second row muttered, "They're making this about race. This is supposed to be church." A woman near the back hissed, "This is manipulation. They should just leave." The air was thick with tension, faith colliding with prejudice. Whitmore raised his hands. "Enough!" His voice boomed. "This family has shown more grace in one morning than many of us have shown in years. Shame on us." His rebuke left the room trembling. Then, something no one expected happened. An elderly woman in the front row, Miss Eleanor, one of the oldest members of the church, rose to her feet. Her cane tapped against the floor as she walked slowly toward the Carters. Her voice wavered, but her words were clear. "I've been in this church for 60 years. I've seen joy and I've seen shame. And today, I see the shame of my own heart." Tears slid down her cheeks. She turned to the Carters. "Forgive us. Forgive me. You do belong here. And I pray you'll stay. Because we need you more than you need us." Her words broke something in the congregation. Dozens of heads bowed. A few began to sob. Rochelle's heart ached at the vulnerability, the rare honesty. But she also knew not everyone would change so easily. As the Carters left the pulpit, the sanctuary buzzed with mixed emotions. Some rushed forward to embrace them, apologizing, asking forgiveness. Others turned away, their pride unwilling to bend. Marcus whispered to Rochelle, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." She nodded. "But maybe it's a start." Jordan squeezed his dad's hand. "We reminded them, didn't we?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Yes, son. You did. But none of them knew the twist still waiting ahead. Because what started as a Sunday of rejection would soon become a movement that shook the entire town. By Monday morning, the whispers had spread far beyond the church walls. At the local diner, heads leaned together over steaming coffee cups. "Did you hear what happened at Whitmore's church?" one man muttered. "They let that family take over the service." At the grocery store, Rochelle felt the stares. Some eyes softened with shame, others hardened with judgment. Whichever it was, she knew her family had become the talk of the town. Marcus wasn't surprised. Small towns thrived on gossip, but this time the gossip was about them. What he didn't expect, however, was the phone call Tuesday evening. "Marcus," Pastor Whitmore said over the phone, his voice heavy, "I need to speak with you and your wife. May I come by?" Marcus hesitated. He wasn't sure what more there was to say. But Rochelle, ever gracious, said, "Of course, Pastor." That night, Whitmore sat in their modest living room, his hands folded tightly. "I owe you honesty," he began. "Sunday exposed something I've known for years. Our church has harbored prejudice. And now the board wants a meeting. They aren't happy." Marcus frowned. "With us? Or with you?" Whitmore looked down. "Both." Rochelle leaned forward. "What are they planning?" Whitmore exhaled. "Some want to vote on whether your family should be allowed to officially join our congregation. They're disguising it as procedure. But I know the truth." The room went silent. Marcus clenched his fists. "They want to humiliate us in front of the whole town." Whitmore nodded. "I'm ashamed to say it, but yes. The board meeting is Wednesday night. I want you there. I want them to look you in the eye." Rochelle exchanged a look with Marcus. She saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire she'd seen on Sunday. "We'll be there," she said firmly. That night, Rochelle tucked Naomi into bed. The little girl whispered, "Mommy, are we going back to that church?" Rochelle kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby. And this time we won't be alone." Wednesday night arrived. The fellowship hall was crowded, not just with board members, but with townspeople eager to witness the spectacle. At the long oak table sat the church elders, faces stern and unreadable. Pastor Whitmore took his seat at the head, while Marcus and Rochelle sat across from him, their children by their side. Elder Thompson, a gray-haired man with a booming voice, cleared his throat. "We are here tonight to discuss the matter of membership." The word dripped with condescension. "Some feel that recent disruptions have threatened the unity of this congregation," Thompson continued. "We must decide what's best for the church's future." Marcus's jaw tightened. He could feel every eye on him. Whitmore gestured toward Marcus. "You may speak." Marcus stood slowly. His voice carried, calm but unyielding. "My family came here to worship God. That's all. But instead of being welcomed, we were judged, mocked, and made to feel unwelcome in his house. Not by God, but by his people." He looked directly at Thompson. "If this is about procedure, then ask yourselves, when did procedure ever matter more than faith? When did paperwork matter more than love?" Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some nodded, others scowled. Marcus pressed on. "My children deserve to grow up knowing the church as a place of grace, not hate. If you cannot offer that, then maybe it's not us who don't belong. Maybe it's the prejudice that doesn't belong." Rochelle rose beside him, her voice firm. "I'm not here to beg for acceptance. I'm here to remind you who you claim to serve. Jesus sat with the outcasts. He welcomed the rejected. If he walked through those doors today, would you judge him too? Would you ask him to prove his worth?" The room buzzed with tension. A few heads bowed in shame. Others stiffened in resistance. Naomi's small voice broke the silence. Jesus loves me. The innocence of the words struck harder than any argument. A ripple of emotion swept through the crowd. The board erupted in whispers, arguments spilling into the open. Elder Thompson slammed his hand on the table. This is not about race. It's about order. Miss Eleanor, the elderly woman who had spoken up on Sunday, rose from her seat. Her cane tapped against the floor as she glared at Thompson. No, this is exactly about race. And it's about the sickness in our hearts. Gasps filled the room. She turned to the Carters. I will not stand by while this family is shamed. If they walk out of this church tonight, they won't be walking alone. A wave of murmurs followed. Some nodded in agreement. Others muttered angrily. The church was splitting before everyone's eyes. By the end of the night, no vote was taken. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Accusations flying, tears falling. But something had shifted. For the first time, Marcus realized their presence had ignited something larger than themselves. The cracks in the church's foundation were now visible to all. As the Carters walked out into the cool night air, Rochelle whispered, "This is just the beginning." Marcus looked up at the steeple, its cross illuminated against the night sky. He felt the weight of history pressing down on him. And deep down he knew something was about to break wide open. The Carters hadn't even reached their driveway before their phones buzzed with messages. A friend texted Marcus, "Heard what you said at the meeting, powerful brother." Another warned Rochelle, "Be careful. Some folks are angrier than they let on." By Thursday morning, it wasn't just the congregation talking. It was the whole town. At the barber shop, Marcus's name came up with respect. At Rochelle's workplace, co-workers quietly asked what had really happened. For every supporter, though, there was a critic. Online forums lit up with heated debates. Anonymous comments accused the Carters of stirring trouble. Others defended them, calling them brave. The town was dividing, one conversation at a time. Inside the church office, Pastor Whitmore sat with his head in his hands. The elders had cornered him. "You've lost control," Elder Thompson sneered. "This family has brought division into our holy house." Whitmore raised his head, eyes burning. "No, the division was already here. They just exposed it." Another elder slammed a binder shut. "Then maybe you're the problem." The pastor's voice cracked. "If standing for truth makes me the problem, then so be it." For the first time in years, Whitmore felt like a stranger in his own church. That evening, Rochelle answered the door to find Miss Eleanor standing on the porch, cane in hand. "My daddy built half the pews in that church," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "And I'll be damned if his legacy is tied to hate." She looked Rochelle in the eye. "If they vote you out, I'm walking out too. And I know others who will follow." Rochelle felt tears prick her eyes. For so long they'd felt alone. Now, allies were emerging from places they least expected. Friday night, Marcus received a call from a man he barely knew. David, the church's former treasurer. "Meet me at the diner," David whispered. "I've got something you need to see." Marcus hesitated, but curiosity won. At the diner's corner booth, David slid an envelope across the table. Inside were copies of financial records, payments, transfers, unexplained expenses. Marcus's eyes widened. "Are you saying?" David nodded grimly. "Thompson's been siphoning money from the church fund for years. He's hiding behind tradition, but the truth is he doesn't want anyone exposing him." Marcus leaned back, the weight of it settling in. This wasn't just about prejudice anymore. It was about corruption. Sunday came again, but this time the pews buzzed with more than gossip. They buzzed with tension. The Carters entered with heads high, Naomi clutching her mother's hand. Conversations hushed as eyes followed them to their seat. Whitmore's sermon was different that morning. He spoke with fire. "Church," he declared, "the gospel is not a weapon of exclusion. It is a table of welcome. If we cannot see Christ in every face, then we do not know him at all." Some nodded, tears in their eyes. Others folded their arms, stone-faced. At the end, Elder Thompson stood. "This congregation must decide. Either we uphold tradition, or we surrender to chaos. The sanctuary erupted into shouts, some demanding a vote, others defending the Carters. It was clear, a storm was about to break. Just as the shouting reached its peak, Marcus stood. He held the envelope high. "Before you vote," he said, his voice ringing out, "maybe you should know the truth about the man demanding order." Gasps rippled as he laid the papers on the altar. Financial records, years of stolen money. While we were arguing about skin color, someone was robbing this church blind. Thompson's face drained of color. "This is a lie," he barked. But David, the former treasurer, rose from his seat. "It's no lie. I kept the records myself." The sanctuary fell into stunned silence. All eyes turned to Thompson. His bluster crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Members murmured angrily, their loyalty slipping away. Whitmore stepped forward, voice steady. "This house of God was never meant to be built on lies. Tonight, we choose truth over prejudice, integrity over corruption." The board members shifted uncomfortably, suddenly exposed. Rochelle rose, her voice calm but cutting. "You tried to humiliate us. Instead, you revealed yourselves. God's light always finds the shadows." Naomi tugged on her father's sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, are we safe now?" Marcus knelt, hugging her. "Yes, baby, we're safe, because truth is stronger than lies." By the time the meeting adjourned, Thompson had been stripped of authority. The church was left shaken but changed. Some members stormed out, unwilling to face their own prejudice. Others lingered, ashamed but ready to rebuild. And the Carters? They left not as outsiders, but as the family who had turned the tide. That night, Marcus looked at Rochelle under the glow of the street lamp. "We didn't just fight for us," he whispered. "We fought for every family who will come after us." Rochelle smiled softly. "And we won." The days following the revelation were like aftershocks from an earthquake. The church that once prided itself on unity now wrestled with division laid bare. Some members walked away, unwilling to face the mirror. Others lingered, ashamed but humbled, whispering apologies to Marcus and Rochelle in the grocery aisle, in the post office, in parking lots. Pastor Whitmore called a special service that Sunday. Not a sermon, but a reckoning. "We've sinned against one another," he confessed before the congregation. "We've let pride, prejudice, and greed poison our fellowship. But healing begins with truth, and truth has walked among us, in the courage of this family." His words hung in the air, not as condemnation, but as an invitation. Slowly, something shifted in the town. At the diner, conversations turned from gossip to reflection. A white farmer admitted aloud, "Maybe I ain't treated folks as equal as I should have." At the high school, Naomi's classmates rallied around her, saying, "Your family showed us what real faith looks like." Even Miss Eleanor noticed the difference. "For the first time in years," she told Rochelle with a wry smile, "I think this church might actually become what it was meant to be." The Carters hadn't just exposed corruption, they had awakened consciences. Pastor Whitmore, once timid and compliant, found a new boldness. He faced down critics who accused him of betraying tradition. "Tradition that silences truth isn't holy," he declared at a town forum. "It's bondage, and I won't carry those chains anymore." The community listened. Some left in anger, but others leaned in, sensing a revival of something authentic. For the first time, Whitmore felt free, not to please men, but to serve God with honesty. One quiet evening, Marcus sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Rochelle joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you think it's over?" she asked softly. Marcus shook his head. "Racism doesn't end with one meeting. But we showed our kids, that silence isn't the answer. That standing firm matters." Rochelle leaned against his shoulder. "And that's enough for me." Their children played in the yard, laughter ringing like a hymn of hope. Months later, the church felt different. The Carters weren't just members, they were embraced. Naomi joined the children's choir, her sweet voice carrying through the sanctuary. Marcus was invited to teach a Bible study on justice and mercy. Rochelle organized food drives, building bridges with families who had once avoided her in the pews. What had begun as hostility became an opportunity for transformation. The church was no longer a house of exclusion, it was becoming a place of healing. As for Thompson, his downfall was swift. Stripped of his position, he tried to smear the Carters in desperation. But his lies carried no weight against the truth. In time, he left the town altogether, his legacy reduced to whispers of shame. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. "He wanted us gone," he told Rochelle. "But in the end, he's the one who had to leave." Years later, people still spoke of the Carter stand. Naomi, now a teenager, often heard her teachers say, "Your family changed this town." The story of their defiance, their courage, and their faith became more than just an episode of church drama. It became a parable. A reminder that truth, once spoken, can't be silenced. One evening, Naomi asked her father, "Why did you keep fighting, even when it hurt?" Marcus smiled gently. "Because, baby, sometimes God puts you in the fire so others can see the light." On the anniversary of that fateful Sunday, Pastor Whitmore invited Marcus to the pulpit. "Brother Marcus," he said, "would you share a word with us?" Marcus looked out over the congregation. Faces once hostile now softened. He spoke simply. "We came here as strangers, mocked for not belonging. But now we know, belonging doesn't come from man's approval. It comes from God's love. And that love is bigger than hate." The sanctuary erupted in amens. Naomi squeezed her mother's hand, tears shining in her young eyes. The Carters walked out of the church that day not as victims, but as victors. The steeple towered above, its cross gleaming against the sky. For Marcus, it wasn't just wood and nails, it was a symbol, a reminder that trials birth testimonies, and pain can birth purpose. Their story had begun with mockery, but it ended with transformation of hearts, of a church, of a town. And as they climbed into their car, Naomi whispered, "Daddy, we belong here." Marcus smiled. "Yes, baby girl. We always did." If the story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss powerful stories of justice, hope, and truth. Together, we can keep these conversations alive.